Dante, Dr. Samina. So, for my response to the embodied creative practice, I'm going to do Pechakucha. And I really thought this was an interesting way to respond when I was shown this in my master's program. Essentially, it's just 20 slides. I talk through 20 of them for 20 seconds each, which would be about 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And I will usually, well, I kind of will have kind of like set up the context with protocols or disclaimer, and then I'll have afterthoughts of kind of things that I don't express in it. So essentially, the main content, the Pechakucha part, should take about 6 minutes and 40 seconds, and anything else is extra. So that's that's kind of a precursor to the assignment, and yeah, I really thought that this is a cool assignment. So, as I mentioned, as in the form of a disclaimer, I have to talk about protocols. So, in anytime there's kind of an exchange of knowledge, any kind of work that is to be done or asked to be done, sort of anything in a cultural way has from a Nihil perspective, there should always be tobacco offered. And then depending on the person who's asking for something, you and what you're capable of, you can offer not only tobacco, but if you can offer like money or for the context of the sweat, there would be something like broadcloth, and that would be kind of wipanasan. And in a spiritual way, these things are seen more than just what's talked about, right? So the idea of money, we were used to just paying for things, but in a way, we're paying not only for the time that the elder spends with us, but to acknowledge the spirits that are going to be present and here and be present and here and help, right? Tobacco goes back a long time ago. There's actually kind of a creation story that I don't have the time to get into, and I'm only very limited on that understanding. But there has been an offering of tobacco, so that anytime you ask somebody to do something, or anytime you want knowledge, or anytime, like I said, that tobacco has to be there in order for both parties to be full in blessings, I guess you could say, or to work together in that good way. And like I said, there's levels to there's levels to what I'm going to be talking about that I don't have won't have the time to. Otherwise, it would be kind of a couple of hours of just explaining these things. But when we go through not only the Pechakucha but the reflections afterwards, I'm going to try my best to make things in a way where it's shareable, where it's understood, because this is these are the teachings I got this night from the sweat we had, and I'm able to share with you now because that's the knowledge I was given. So now I can share it with you, whereas you don't have to like feel obligated to give me tobacco right now because that's the knowledge I purchased, I worked for, and now so. But any other person, I wouldn't share this knowledge with them unless it was kind of unless they gave me tobacco and asked about it, or unless I approached them and I this is kind of how life is, right? And so these are, and what's interesting is that it also goes back to this PhD studies in a way where it's free knowledge now, right? But at the same time, if there's no tobacco in our way, it's not necessarily free, right? And so just those interesting dichotomies and those things that kind of keep the institution, and our ways. So I just want to say that. So like I said, those are kind of basic protocols. I want to share with you. And now I'm gonna start. So like I said, a slide it should be about 20 seconds, and um, I'll just talk through. So this is the sign heading north of Regina that we always take, or that I always take to get to Quacatoos. Quacatoos is about an hour, 20 minutes north of Regina, and everybody usually says we gotta take the road less traveled. Well, for me, this is the road usually traveled. This is at the Evers building, that a steel plant, and this they have a group of Namushimwak Pasqua Mustuswak. They have a bunch of buffalo there that they're trying to build up again, to build up the population, and that's part of Evraz's reconciliation plan. So after seeing those buffalo, we drive for about 20 minutes, and then this is kind of a view for people that live around here that they enjoy this view. And this is the road just before we get into the beautiful valley, or Fort Qu'Appelle or Qu'Appelle Valley. There are some teachings about the valley itself, but like I said, there's only so much time. So this is the general view that you can see once you start coming down the road. You could kind of see across the road to the road straight of us, and then there's the valley. And so when you drive through the valley, you come up on the other side, and on the other side you can see Pipots First Nations. That's another reserve that's only about half an hour north of Regina. This is actually where my mom's dad's family all live on, and this is the reserve we come from on my mom's dad's side. So then now you drive for another 50-ish minutes, and for me, I'm usually thinking about the intent of the sweat. What am I gonna ask for? What I'm gonna talk about? How am I gonna present these things to Dexter, my elder? How are we gonna figure this out? And so this is the road, how it looks when you first turn down the Quacatoos Road, and this is how it looked today. It was pretty calm, and it's about from here to Dexter's about 10 minutes now. After driving that road for about 8 or so minutes, then you're going to come to the school sign. And this is usually where you tell people you got to turn down at the Sinagisic Education School sign, take a right, and then you're going to come up to another sign. Nagi, you're going to come to the stop sign, and this is where you want to take left. And so I just kind of just wanted to give some context, some visual of what can be seen as we kind of head towards Dexter's, where the sweat lodge is, and where ceremonies take place. And then you want to take a right where it says warning, property protected by Bigfoot, Mr. Pale. And what's interesting is even in a Cree understanding, Bigfoot isn't necessarily a bad spirit, but Bigfoot is the equivalent to Saint Peter in heaven. So this is how it looks before we get to Sweat House on the left there. Most of everything Dexter has ever had, he's worked for it. So that bus he got, he doesn't get paid, but he works on that bus, that work truck. Even those ceremony houses on the left, those are all things he bought and paid for. Mama tawi atoskiwin. So that means kind of like good work, or some work that's good. And essentially what you see here is where the rocks are going to be set up, where that wood's going to be placed, and this is kind of where everything starts to happen. But not only does the work have to be done outside, it has to be done inside. So I wanted to just kind of show a little bit of imagery of what happens inside. I didn't take a picture of the sweat, but because I feel like we're not quite there yet. But I had to clean up, I had to start the fire, I had to organize everything. So this is Namushimasanapio Walk, which means the grandfather rocks. And I had to pick and sort through and find kind of the right amount and the right size, because once they get really hot, we have to carry them in, and sometimes they might get too heavy. Yeah, and then for these guys, I had to, at Toski, is just work. So I had to work to find the right amount of logs, the thicknesses, the lengths, and in the midst of all that intent, what's my intent? That's all I've been thinking about up until this point, about almost 2 hours in. So finally have it all set up. And then, like I said, my intention. So right after this step, I would have went around with tobacco. I would have been giving all the things we used tobacco, and then I would have been thinking about praying for the intention of the sweat, what I'm going to learn, what am I going to teach, how am I going to do these. And then I asked Nimushimeskateo for help, and it just started. So you could see the start of the flames. This is the start of kind of the rock's going to start to cook, the elements that we've been using, the Mushim Sanapiowak, the trees, and the Mushimeskateo. Briefly after the fires started, I wanted to just kind of show the views, what is being seen from the angle of the logs, and just see, just enjoy, and just enjoy the evening, enjoy the beauty, just enjoy. Throughout the sweat, there was lots of things talked about, but one of the things that Dexter the elder he reiterated was this horse I created for him almost 9 years ago. And there is a long story to it. There's also some more meaning to it, but this is what I created for him. Ekosi or Exe. And this is kind of how it looked when we were leaving. And what was really cool was that the moon was bright and you could kind of see your own shadow. So it was a good evening, good experience, good prayers. So that was my Pechakucha. I just wanted to use that in a way to concisely show the context of how I go about and do things for the sweat lodge. But like I said, there's things I want to explain, and I'm going to use this next image that I've showed already to explain a little bit more about the learning and what and how I proved or how I will move forward with this practice. So I come back to this image. After the intention, after setting up, after getting everything ready, we go in. The rocks are really red, and we close the door so it's pitch black. And now Dexter splashes water on the rocks to create the steam to make it hot. And then he gives me the time to talk. And so I talked. I explained my intention. I explained how our class has been given this opportunity to try different things and how those different things will impact us in a way so we can become better educators. Not only that, but how do we take and understand education from a decolonizing perspective? And for me, I have always and I've always want and expressing what I was thinking about. I my hope is to always, how do we bring these cultural teachings, how do we bring these things we learn in sweat, how do I bring these things as an educator, and how do I put these teachings that I learned from sweat in a practical way to the students in North Central. And Dexter talked about this horse. So like I said, I made this horse about 9 years ago for an art assignment in my undergrad. And the horse, really quickly, this story, there was an artist that made this horse a few years after the Battle of Little Bighorn. And this horse was a horse that lasted and went through the whole war of the battle, or went through the whole Battle of Little Bighorn. And that horse got shot 7 times. And then at the final, when they finally won, the 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 battle was won by the Indians. The horse finally dropped and died. And that was the story, and that's what I gave to Dexter, because I created this because I thought this old man has been around for such a long time and he works so hard and he does so much for the people in the community that he's gonna just work through right to the end. But when I gave this to him, he didn't see the vision. And what I mean by that is he knew I struggled in making this object. He also knew that in a way where I was struggling in life. And he talked about that process. He talked about how, yes, I knew what I wanted to do, but how would I get there? I knew what I wanted to do, but how would I get there? And so what I did was I took the road less traveled to get to a point where the culture, the ceremonies grounded me enough to become and be at a place where I'm at today. So that's one kind of reading from it. The other thing is then he started teaching me. Then he started talking and he was speaking in Cree, like most of the time he was speaking in Cree. He talks about how hard it is for educators to work with young people because young people are so emotional. So young people are so over here and over here, and it takes certain kind of people, and he acknowledges that as an elder. But when, like I said, I express myself, how do I bring these things to the elder or bring the culture to these students in our central? One of the things, the first thing he said, aside from that, was you got to teach them the first thing that they should do is when they first wake up, open their eyes, realize that while we're on this earth, we can try. Then the second thing we do is we acknowledge Creator, Mama Witawe Mau, or Notawi Nan, Kisimantu. We honor and we say thank you. Thank you for another day to try. So that was essentially kind of what he was teaching. And then we had another guy. He knows lots, and he just talked to me. He sat on different committees. He's been an advisor for PhD students, and he talked to me like that. And then my adopted father, he talked to me the same way. And what's interesting is I gave him a pack of smokes before we started the sweat, and I invited him out. And then he was like, son, I hope you have 25 good thoughts, 25 good lessons from what you have tonight. And I almost have 25 slides. But anyways, and he was just talking about, much like I didn't know how to build this horse. I didn't know where I was going, but in the culture it grounded me and it brought me to a place where I can see where I needed to go. And throughout the lodge, I was getting commended, that taking a PhD is such a big deal and all this kind of stuff. And they were kind of like patting me on the back, which is good, right? Encouraging. But I just put it back on the culture. I said I wouldn't be here at the U of T in a class like this if it wasn't for the culture, if I wasn't going to sweats, if I wasn't going to big lodges, if I wasn't going to learn my language, I wouldn't be where I am. And so now as I think about it, essentially all that I've done, because for me, actually, it didn't start, this intention thing didn't start this night. It started a long time ago when I started trying to learn how to put up the sweat lodge. for me to pit up those rocks to sort and know which rocks to use, for me to use and know which wood to use, for me to put it on the cradle and stack the wood the way it was, that took years and years of learning. It didn't just happen one night. I've been going to this sweat for going on 11 years now, and my adopted dad taught me how to set these things up about 11 years ago. But it took me years and years to get efficient at it, because what that would take somebody else might take 2 hours, an hour and a half for me to set up that night. It was only minus 12. It wasn't too chilly, but to get under like the rocks that were frozen together, get them out, it took 40, 50 minutes, an hour maybe. In the summertime, I could get this up by myself in 30 minutes, and the fire going like. But in the wintertime, it took me a bit longer. But all that to say, like I said, it took me years to get where I'm at, and it all started, you know, with the road less traveled, the culture, the people that want to walk the cultural way. But for me, it's now become the road I usually take. All that to say is, the last thing I want to say is, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago ish, I maybe 6 years ago, I I didn't have my one degree finished, and I already had 8 years in that degree. I was in Indigenous Studies at First Nations University, but I kind of was like a little bit all over the place. And so 20, no, actually, I would say 2017, 2018, about there. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I knew I was just subconsciously, I would teach people, I would tell people things, tell stories, build people up that way. And then my dad was like, you know what? My adopted dad was like, you know what? You should become a teacher. And then Dexter, my guime, was like, I think you should become a teacher. So my identity, my path, all these things weren't affirmed until I was doing culture. And much like that horse, making that horse, yes, I thought I had a plan, but I didn't know how to get there. Ceremony, advice, they all had a plan, but it took me to stay in the culture to get there. So anyway, so that's kind of that, I guess. I Like I said, I showed as safe as I thought, because technically we're not supposed to show sweat lodges or those things, because what people will do, will just take and steal or whatever. And, oh, I seen them set up this way, right? Like, but and the other thing, like I said, that there's levels and layers to this, and I feel like I barely scratched the surface in the time we have. But Kinaskamatin, I'm really grateful, Dr. Samina, and I really appreciate that we were able to do this. I look forward to our next time, and yeah, like I said, I'm just really Mistahi Kinaskamatin. I'm really grateful, big grateful, I'm really grateful. So with that, Exe, Mastas, see you later.